Hello, my friend. I don't know when in your life you've stumbled upon this video on a peaceful morning, a weary afternoon, or a restless night when sleep won't come. But if you're searching for something to keep your heart steady in a world full of turmoil, then you've come to the right place. I am someone who has lived through over 60 autumns. I've seen success and failure, love and lost, dreams born and quietly fade away. And through it all, one thing has stayed with me like a loyal companion: Stoicism. No, Stoicism isn't about being cold or enduring pain with rigid silence. Stoicism is the art of living with clarity, knowing what's in our control, and learning to let go of what isn't. It's like learning to stand still in the middle of a storm. Not because you're made of stone, but because you found where your peace truly comes from. In this video, I'll share with you the 10 most profound lessons of Stoic philosophy, not through theory, but through real stories and honest reflections, spoken from the heart of someone who has lived, stumbled, and is still learning how to live simply each day. I'm not here to teach you anything. I just want to sit with you like two old friends on a porch, pouring each other a cup of tea, whispering quietly about life. And if even one of these lessons reaches you, soothes a worry, eases a wound, or quiets a lingering question, then this video has fulfilled its purpose. Are you ready? Let's begin with Lesson 1. Move your body. Lesson 1. Move your body. Let me ask you to imagine something. It's a chilly morning. You wake up feeling like you have no reason to get out of bed. There's an emptiness, a kind of heaviness, as if the world is moving on without you and you're stuck behind. I've been there. And I know many of us, especially at our age, have felt that same weight. But one day I stepped outside, just to walk around the neighborhood. No grand purpose, just to move, just to breathe. And do you know what happened? With every step, it felt like I was walking out of the fog. I didn't solve all my problems, but I felt clearer. Lighter. Moving your body, it sounds so simple. But to me, it's a kind of walking meditation, a quiet way of checking in with myself, a short dance in the living room, a stretch beneath the morning sun. All of it whispers one thing: I'm still here. I'm still strong. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the body and the mind are two sides of the same coin. When you neglect your body, the mind dims. But when you begin to care for the body, something remarkable happens. The mind starts to light up again. You don't need to be an athlete. You just need to step out of the shadows. Every little movement is a declaration that you haven't given up. It's a way of taking back control. I've seen it in many of my friends. Some started with gardening. Others simply stood up every hour to stretch. Slowly, they began to laugh more, talk more, live more. So if today you're feeling lost, try stepping outside. Let your body remind you of a truth you might have forgotten: you're stronger than you think. And with every step, you are writing a new story, not one of defeat, but of renewal. Lesson 2. Be a better friend to yourself. An old friend of mine, a retired veteran, once told me, I can forgive the whole world, except myself. And I understood exactly what he meant. Sometimes we are our own harshest critics. When we fail, we berate ourselves. When we feel lonely, we ask, maybe I don't deserve to be loved. But think about it: if your closest friend collapsed in front of you, would you scold them? Or would you reach out and say something kind, something gentle like, it's okay, you can get back up? The ancient Romans had a philosopher named Clitomachus. One day he overheard a man speaking to himself in a harsh, cold tone. Clitomachus walked up and softly said, "Don't speak to yourself as if you were your enemy. Speak as a friend would." That story has stayed with me for many years, and I share it with you now, not to sugarcoat sorrow, but to remind you, gentleness is not weakness. It is strength. Being kind to yourself is not indulgence. It is responsibility. The responsibility to keep the flame inside you from burning out. Because if you can't be a friend to yourself, who will be? Lesson 3. Be satisfied more. I once met a man. He used to be the CEO of a major company in Chicago. He told me I had everything: money, fame, even a third home, but I always felt something was missing. I didn't know what, just that something was missing. The truth is, many of us have felt that way. We reach one goal, then chase another. And somewhere in that endless pursuit, we risk losing the most precious thing of all: inner peace. The Stoics teach us this: if you can't appreciate what you already have, nothing outside of you will ever make you feel whole. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who always craves more." I wrote that down on a small piece of paper and taped it to my desk. Every morning I read it and asked myself, what can I be grateful for today? Maybe it's just a warm cup of coffee, a wife still asleep beside me, or the sound of birds outside the window. Simple things, but they are the roots of real happiness. If you're feeling lonely or down, try pausing for a moment. Look around. Maybe you're not missing anything at all. Maybe all you need is a little stillness to realize you already have enough. Lesson 4. Take a view from above. I remember sitting on a plane once, gazing out the window at the mountains, rivers, and bustling cities below. Suddenly, everything looked so small. My house, the one I used to worry about down to every chipped bit of paint, was nothing more than a tiny speck. It reminded me of Marcus Aurelius. Even as an emperor, he often told himself to take a view from above, not with his eyes, but with his mind. He imagined rising above the earth, looking down on all the conflicts, the suffering, the competition, and seeing it all as mere dust in the vastness of the universe. That perspective, it doesn't make life less meaningful. It makes it clearer. It reminds us that today's sorrow is just a moment, that the winding path we're on is still part of a far bigger picture. A friend of mine, after losing his life partner, was stuck in grief for months. Then one day during a meditation session, he said, I couldn't let go of the pain, but I started to see it as smaller inside the larger picture of my life. You see, there are things we can't change, but we can change how we see them, and sometimes just changing the way we look is all it takes to begin again. Lesson 5. Learn to suffer with others. I remember once hiking in Colorado with a few friends. I was already in my 50s. There was a steep, rocky stretch where the wind cut like a blade and the cold numbed everything. I wanted to quit. But then I looked over at a friend beside me. He was shivering too, out of breath, yet he held out his hand and said, "We're not climbing this alone. We often think pain is private, a wound we must tend to in silence. But I'll tell you this, sometimes it's when we allow others to suffer alongside us that we discover our real strength." Stoics weren't closed off. They were warriors who knew how to connect. They understood that an army is stronger than a lone soldier. Like support groups, meditation circles, or even two friends sitting quietly together, that's where loneliness begins to melt away. You don't have to bear it all on your own. Share it. Walk with someone. Maybe you don't need advice. Maybe you just need a knowing look, a steady hand, a quiet presence. Because in the darkest moments, connection, even the faintest one, is the brightest light. Lesson 6. Ask for help. I used to believe that asking for help was a sign of weakness, but age taught me otherwise. It's a sign of courage. I have a friend, a widow, who lived alone after her husband passed. For a long time, she never told her children how empty she felt. Until one day she called her daughter and said, "I just want you to know I feel very lonely." And from that moment, everything began to change. Marcus Aurelius, a mighty emperor, once wrote, "Never be ashamed to need help. Even the strongest need a companion." You don't need to shout it in the streets. Sometimes it's just a message, a small gathering, or simply admitting I'm not okay right now. You're not small for doing that. In fact, you're becoming deeper, more connected, more human. That's a kind of strength, the strength of honesty and trust. Lesson 7. Focus on your path. Have you ever looked at someone else and wondered, why do they seem happy, successful, fulfilled? While I'm still struggling, I ask not to sadden you, but to let you know you're not alone. And to remind you every person walks a different path, and the fastest way to lose yourself is to follow someone else's. Seneca called this euthymia, a state of inner calm, when you're no longer swayed by other people's roads. When you stop chasing outside expectations, you begin to hear your own true voice again. There was a man I once counseled retired after 35 years as a civil servant who felt empty because he thought he hadn't done anything great. I asked him, "What about your loyalty? Your steady hands, your grandchildren growing up in your care, aren't those accomplishments? Your path doesn't have to be grand. It just needs to be true. Walk it, step by step, and you'll reach places no one else can." Lesson 8. Remember the impermanence of things. One autumn afternoon, I sat in my garden watching leaves fall. Each one spun through the air, gently landing without a sound. And I remembered the words of Marcus Aurelius, "Even the greatest of us return to dust." We live in an age afraid of disappearance, afraid of aging, of being forgotten, of being left behind. But the Stoics remind us everything will pass, and that, more than anything, is what makes life precious. Have you ever felt your heart break after a relationship ended, after losing someone you love, after your body no longer felt like it used to? So have I. But I've learned when we accept impermanence, we begin to live more deeply in the present. We stop delaying love. We stop letting today slip by in regret. Happiness isn't in holding on. It's in cherishing even when we know that what we hold will one day be gone. Lesson 9. Embrace adversity. An old friend of mine, a retired carpenter, once told me something I'll never forget. No piece of wood becomes strong without going through fire. You see, adversity isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it's proof you're being forged into something stronger. Seneca once wrote, "Those whom the gods love, they send trials." It sounds harsh, but in truth it's an act of mercy, because struggle awakens the strength that comfort never could. When you're facing hardship, loss, failure, or a long season of loneliness, try asking yourself, what can this teach me? Not to deny the pain, but to give it meaning. Like a seed that must crack open to grow, you too must break through old shells to reach the light. And adversity is the silent gardener digging up the hard soil of your soul so something new can take root. Lesson 10. Don't suppress your emotions. There was a time when I couldn't sleep. Not because of back pain, but because of a quiet sorrow I never faced. Instead, I buried myself in work, in news, in anything but myself. Until one rainy afternoon, I broke down over a song playing in a cafe. I share that not out of shame, but to remind you emotions aren't the enemy. The Stoics never said, "Feel nothing." They simply taught us not to be ruled by our feelings. You can cry. You can feel lonely. You can grieve, feel empty, feel tired. What matters is, don't run. Listen, write, talk to someone you trust. Seneca once wrote letters to comfort those in pain, not to erase their sadness, but to give it dignity, and to help them walk through it like walking through the rain, soaked but alive. Lesson 11. Seek stillness. Once I walked along the Oregon coast early in the morning. The wind was salty, the waves steady, and there wasn't another soul in sight. I stood still. And in that moment, no phone, no tasks. I heard my own breath. I felt alive. Modern life is loud, but the soul only speaks in quiet. Marcus Aurelius once described stillness as an inner fortress, a place you can return to no matter how chaotic the world becomes. Just a few minutes a day, meditation, prayer, or simple silence is a priceless gift you give yourself. In stillness, you realize loneliness is no longer a pit. It becomes a space where you can hear yourself and discover what you truly need. Lesson 12. Accept things as they are. I once lost someone very dear suddenly. I was angry, devastated, full of regret. I wished I could go back just a week, just a day to say one last word. But time doesn't run backward. and I had to learn to live with what I could not change. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It is one of the bravest acts of a mature soul. Aurelius called it amor fati, love of fate. Not just enduring what happens, but embracing it as an inseparable part of the journey. Picture life as a river. You can fight the current, or you can learn to swim with it, discovering beauty along the way. When you stop resisting something strange happens, you begin to feel life not as you wanted it to be, but as it truly is. Lesson 13. Practice gratitude. Every morning I make coffee, open the window, and write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Some days it's just I'm still breathing. Other days it's heard my daughter's voice on the phone. And you know what? That small habit changed everything. Gratitude is medicine for a weary soul. It doesn't erase sadness, but it helps you see the light, even if it's faint. The Stoics spoke of gratitude as a moral practice, a way of cleansing the mind each day. If your heart feels heavy today, try this. Write down one thing, just one that you still have. A roof. Someone who calls your name. A song that stirs something in you. Gratitude doesn't change your circumstances, but it changes how you see the world. Lesson 14. Give what you feel lacking. A friend of mine. He lost his wife in his 60s, told me he felt unbearably alone. I asked him, "Is there something you could do for someone else who's lonely too?" So he did something simple every week. He visited a nursing home and read books to residents who had no family left. A few months later, he told me, "I still miss my wife, but I'm no longer lonely." When we lack love, let's give love. When we lack joy, let's bring joy to someone else. Stoicism doesn't teach us to close off. It teaches us to act with both reason and heart. You want to feel like you matter. Create meaning for someone else. That's the shortest path to healing the emptiness within. Lesson 15. Don't run from sadness. An old friend of mine, now in her 70s, once whispered to me after her husband's funeral, "I thought I needed to be strong to stay busy, to carry on like nothing happened. But the more I tried, the more exhausted I became." We're often taught that sadness is something to overcome as quickly as possible, that if we're still grieving, we're somehow weak. But you know, in Stoic philosophy, no one ever told you to pretend you weren't hurting. Epictetus once said, "It's not the events themselves that disturb us, but the way we perceive them." I've seen many people after loss, after failure, try to suppress what they truly felt. They'd say, "I'm okay," but their eyes told a different story. Their bodies were tired, their voices hollow, and I would gently tell them, "You don't need to outrun your sadness. Sit with it. Listen to what it has to say." Because here's the strange thing, when you're brave enough to face your pain, it becomes the very doorway to healing. One of my students who once battled a serious illness after years of fighting and denial finally did something simple. She sat by a window alone and let the emotions flow like a river. And from that day, she started painting again, cooking again, and laughing again. Have you ever experienced something like that? Don't fear your sadness. Let it walk beside you for a while, and then you'll see it didn't come to stay forever, but to remind you that you still have a heart. You're still alive. Lesson 16. Time is running out. And that's a gift I often joke with friends. Now that I'm in my 60s, I no longer have time for anything off topic. But behind that joke lies a simple, profound truth: we no longer have the luxury of putting off what matters. Seneca once wrote, "It's not that we have too little time, but that we waste too much of it." Have you ever asked yourself, what am I actually spending my time on? One afternoon, I sat with a man in his 50s, a successful banker, and he confessed, "I spent most of my life chasing what others said was important. But what I really wanted to learn, piano, I didn't dare begin until I was 53. I smiled at him and said, "It's not too late, because at least now you're living true." When you realize time is limited, everything becomes clearer. Who do you want to keep in your life? What brings you real joy? And if you only had 5 years left to live, how would you live them? Stoicism doesn't teach us to be gloomy about death. It teaches us to be grateful for life. You don't need to do anything grand. Just live each day with awareness. Don't postpone love. Don't postpone forgiveness. Don't postpone yourself. Limited time isn't something to fear. It's a gift, a reason to live fully. Starting today. Lesson 17. Accept people as they are. One time I was waiting in line at a supermarket. In front of me was an old man hunched over hands, trembling, counting coins to pay. The woman behind me sighed impatiently, and I thought to myself, how quickly we lose patience with the very things we too will one day become. We live in a world that demands speed, efficiency, control. But humans, none of us are perfect. And when we expect others to act exactly how we think they should, to speak and live precisely as we prefer, we're just making ourselves suffer. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and great Stoic, once wrote in his journal, "When you wake up, remember today you will meet the arrogant, the ungrateful, the deceitful. But do not be surprised. They are simply living according to their nature." When I was young, I used to get angry easily when someone was rude or insensitive. But as I've aged, I've come to understand everyone carries a wound we cannot see. And I've learned to let go of expectations, to smile when someone is awkward, to accept. Because when you accept others as they are, you also learn to accept yourself with all your own imperfections. Maybe someone in your life has hurt you. But instead of replaying that pain over and over, ask yourself, can I look at them with understanding instead of anger? Not everyone will change, but you can choose how you respond. And sometimes that choice, that freedom, is the greatest peace a person can have. Dear friend, if you've made it through all 14 lessons with me, then please allow me to say this. I'm proud of you. Not because you've healed or overcome it all, but because you had the courage to sit down, to listen, and to face yourself. Stoicism never promised us a life free of pain. It simply teaches us how to steady the soul like an oil lamp that keeps burning even when the wind howls. If today's words have been helpful, I invite you to keep walking this path with me by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, if it spoke to you, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear these words too. Each week I'll return with more stories, not to help you become someone else, but to help you come home to yourself with calm and with dignity. Remember this, you are not alone. And on this journey, I'm always here with you.